Some people leave you exhausted without saying a single word. No conflict, no argument, just a quiet presence that slowly drains your energy, and most people never realize why. Some people don't need to raise their voice to drain you. They don't need to argue. They don't need to explain themselves. Yet after being around them, you feel tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't a weakness. It's psychology. Energy drain rarely comes from loud people. Loud people are obvious. Your nervous system can identify them as a threat and respond. You prepare yourself. You defend. You disengage. But silent drainers operate differently. They don't trigger your defenses. They bypass them. The first thing they take is not your energy. It's your attention. They enter a space quietly. They observe before they act. They don't compete for dominance. They don't demand connection. Instead, they create a subtle emotional imbalance that your mind feels compelled to resolve. You might not even notice it happening. They sigh softly instead of speaking. They withdraw eye contact instead of disagreeing. They respond slower than expected. They give less warmth than usual. Not enough to alarm you, just enough to register. And your brain reacts instantly, not consciously, biologically. The human nervous system is wired to seek emotional equilibrium. When something feels off, your mind begins scanning for the cause. And when the cause isn't obvious, your attention turns inward. Did I say something wrong? Was my tone off? Am I being too much? Do they need space? That internal questioning costs energy. This is how the drain begins. Not through action, but through absence, silence, delay, withheld response. Each one forces your mind to fill the gap. And the more empathetic, self-aware, or emotionally intelligent you are, the harder this hits you. Because your brain is trained to regulate emotional environments. You sense shifts quickly. You feel tension before others do. That sensitivity is usually a strength, but in the presence of someone who understands how to weaponize it, it becomes a liability. Silent energy drainers don't attack you. They create conditions where you begin working, emotionally, without being asked. You adjust your tone. You soften your words. You over-explain. You offer reassurance that was never requested, not because they demanded it, because the silence demanded it. And here's the disturbing part. They don't need to be consciously malicious for this to work. Some people have learned, often early in life, that withholding emotional feedback gives them control over a room, over conversations, over people. They feel powerful when others lean in. They feel stable when others adjust. So they repeat the behavior. Over time, you start associating their presence with fatigue, but you can't explain why. There's no argument to point to, no obvious wrongdoing, just a constant, low-level emotional effort that never resolves. That's what makes this form of energy drain so dangerous. You don't feel attacked. You feel responsible, and responsibility is exhausting. By the time you realize something is wrong, your body already knows. You feel heavy, slower, less clear. Your nervous system is stuck in quiet alertness, waiting for emotional cues that never fully arrive. This is not random, and it's not harmless. In the next part, you'll understand why strong, emotionally grounded people are the most affected by silent energy drainers, and how this dynamic slowly reshapes your behavior without you realizing it. That's where the real damage begins. What makes silent energy drainers so effective is not what they do, it's what they don't do. They don't clarify. They don't resolve tension. They don't restore balance, and your mind keeps waiting. Once this dynamic is established, something subtle begins to happen inside you. You stop reacting to the present moment and start reacting to anticipated outcomes. Your behavior shifts forward in time. You begin thinking before speaking. You rehearse explanations that were never requested. You prepare emotionally for reactions that haven't occurred yet. This is where energy drain becomes psychological control, because now your nervous system is no longer responding to reality. It's responding to possibility. Silent energy drainers thrive in this space. They don't need to correct you. They don't need to criticize you. They let your mind do the correction for them. If they seem distant, you try harder. If they feel cold, you warm up. If they withdraw, you lean in. And none of this feels forced. That's the trap. The absence of overt manipulation makes the dynamic feel natural, even mutual. You tell yourself you're just being considerate, emotionally intelligent, mature. But what's actually happening is a slow transfer of emotional labor. You are regulating the emotional field. They are benefiting from it. Over time, this creates an imbalance that feels invisible, but heavy. You leave interactions with them feeling depleted, but you can't explain why. There's no argument to replay, no harsh words to justify your exhaustion, just a quiet sense that you've given something and received nothing back. This is where strong people are most vulnerable, because strength often looks like tolerance, like patience, like the ability to carry emotional weight without complaint. Silent drainers recognize this immediately. They sense who will absorb discomfort instead of confronting it, who will adapt instead of pushing back, who will internalize tension rather than externalize it. And once they identify that pattern, they lean into it, not aggressively, but consistently. Consistency is what conditions the nervous system. Your body starts associating their presence with vigilance. Your mind stays slightly alert around them. Your energy never fully relaxes. And here's the most unsettling part. You may start defending them, even to yourself. They're just quiet. They're stressed. They don't mean it. I'm probably overthinking. Those thoughts aren't random. They're protective mechanisms designed to preserve emotional stability. But they also keep the pattern alive. The longer this continues, the more normalized it becomes. You stop noticing the drain. You accept it as part of the relationship. You adjust your baseline. And when exhaustion becomes your normal state, you don't question it anymore. This is how silent energy drainers stay hidden for so long. They don't create explosions. They create erosion. Small, continuous losses that add up over time. Not enough to trigger an alarm, just enough to change you. In the next part, you'll see how this dynamic reaches a breaking point, and the moment awareness returns your power. Because once you understand the pattern, it stops working. That's when the silence loses its grip. Every silent energy drainer reaches a limit. Not because they change, but because you do. The breaking point rarely looks dramatic. There is no confrontation, no argument, no emotional explosion. Instead, it arrives quietly, disguised as exhaustion. You notice you're tired in ways sleep doesn't fix. You feel tense before interactions that shouldn't require effort. You begin dreading silence, not because it's loud, but because it weighs on you. This is the moment clarity begins. Not emotional clarity, psychological clarity. You realize something important. The drain is not accidental. It's not bad timing. It's not misunderstanding. It's a pattern. And patterns exist because they work. Once this realization forms, the dynamic starts to destabilize. Because silent control depends on one thing above all else: unconscious participation. The moment you stop adjusting automatically, the system falters. You pause before explaining yourself. You resist filling the silence. You stop softening your tone to manage someone else's emotional state. And suddenly, the air changes. The same silence that once drained you now exposes them. They become uneasy. They shift. They test again. But this time, the result is different. Because awareness changes how your nervous system responds. You're no longer reacting. You're observing. And observation breaks conditioning. You start noticing how often they withhold, how rarely they reciprocate emotional effort, how the imbalance always moved in one direction. This isn't about blame, it's about alignment. When you stop carrying emotional weight that isn't yours, the drain loses access to you. Not forcefully, but structurally. You no longer feed the pattern. And here's the truth most people never hear. Silent energy drainers don't survive clarity. They rely on confusion. They rely on ambiguity. They rely on your willingness to interpret silence as responsibility. When that disappears, so does their leverage. This is why some relationships fade the moment you become grounded. Why certain people pull away when you stop overfunctioning. Why distance appears once you stop compensating. It's not because you changed for the worse. It's because the dynamic can no longer operate. The final shift is internal. You stop asking, what do they need? And start asking, what am I tolerating? That question alone rewires the entire interaction. You reclaim your energy not by demanding more, but by withholding less from yourself. You speak when you mean it. You rest without guilt. You disengage without explanation. And the silence no longer drains you. It protects you. This is the quiet power strong people regain when they understand the mechanism behind the drain. Not louder boundaries, not emotional armor, just clarity. And clarity is dangerous, not to you, but to anyone who depended on your unconscious adjustment. Because once you see the pattern, you become unreadable again. And unreadable people cannot be drained. They cannot be guided quietly. They cannot be shaped invisibly. They cannot be controlled without consent. That is the moment the mind games end, not with noise, but with stillness.